feel free to return to our channel at any time. After years of keeping quiet, Foreigner's famed guitarist and co-founder Mick Jones has spoken out about his feud with the band's iconic lead singer Lou Gramm. Jones' candor shocked fans who had wondered about Foreigner's inner workings for years. His performance was more than just a reminiscence on the band's past. He revealed the decades-long animosity, resentment, and creative disagreements that had dogged their collaboration. Cold as Ice and I Want to Know What Love Is are two classic rock songs that Gramm and he wrote together. The two men were widely considered to be one of the most successful duos of all time. However, there was a tense relationship lurking beyond the surface of their music. Though integral to the group's early success, Jones claims that Gramm's personality frequently became an issue of contention. In the end, the band broke up due to a personal rupture that had its roots in creative differences. Foreigner was at the top of its game in the late 70s. They seemed unbeatable with albums that topped the charts and concerts that sold out in advance. Lou Gramm, with his commanding vocals and charismatic stage presence, became the band's public face, while Mick Jones, who composed several of their successes, toiled away in the background. But tensions in their relationship intensified in tandem with the band's rising star power. Imagine a creative force and a controlling force, both acting in opposition to one another. In contrast to Jones's reputation as a painstaking perfectionist, Gramm, who was driven more by passion and instinct, favored improvisation in the studio. They frequently got into intense disputes because of their different musical tastes. Gramm desired fervor, while Jones sought accuracy. Their personal enmity grew in tandem with the intensity of their artistic conflicts. The situation had escalated to a critical position by the mid-1980s. Jones claimed that Gramm was a pain to collaborate with because he was unwilling to adapt to the changing musical style of the band. However, Gramm believed that Jones was limiting him by trying to micromanage their music. Gramm eventually quit Foreigner to focus on his solo career in 1990, after years of pent-up resentment, because the situation had grown intolerable. Unfortunately, the band's once-proud heyday devolved into a period of discord and letdown. Gramm took a personal risk when he left Foreigner. It wasn't merely a career break. He wanted to break out on his own as an artist, unencumbered by the limitations he believed Jones had placed on him. Things seemed good at first. His 1987 solo debut, Ready or Not, featured his singing and songwriting abilities and produced singles like Midnight Blue. It wasn't simple to become famous outside of Foreigner, either. Imagine Gramm standing on stage, performing solo, before audiences that had come to hear Foreigner's hits but were unimpressed. The stakes were high, and fresh challenges followed. Gramm was secretly fighting more than simply the music industry. Little did anyone know that he was battling his own personal demons. Even though Gramm was kicked out of Foreigner due to disputes with Mick Jones, his personal life was just as chaotic. As was the case in the past, fame was not free. Health suffered as a result of Gramm's demanding traveling schedule and the stresses of sustaining a successful career. Initially attributed to stress, he started suffering from chronic exhaustion and terrible headaches in the early 1990s. However, Gramm got a diagnosis that changed his life in 1997. A tumor had formed in his brain. Consider the chilling effect that such news would have. The thought of ruining an entire rock era was unbearable for the guy whose voice had defined it. Despite the tumor's benign nature, surgery was necessary, and rehabilitation was a lengthy and difficult process. The medicine Gramm was given caused his weight to inflate, and his voice, which had been strong and unflappable before, became weaker. He was emotionally and physically damaged by the ordeal. The experience altered him, even though he got well and got back to music in the end. He had changed considerably since he had sang Jukebox Hero to sold-out arenas. He had overcome mortality and emerged from the struggle with scars to prove it. After drifting apart for a while, Lou Gramm and Mick Jones finally decided to get back together in 1992 and revive Foreigner. It was an exciting time for the band's admirers, who were hoping for a return to the band's golden days. Envision it. Once again, arenas resounded with the echoes of their legendary hits as Gramm and Jones made a triumphant return to the stage, seemingly reigniting their iconic collaboration. Viewers witnessed two icons standing shoulder to shoulder, prepared to reassert their status as rock legends. The tale, however, was significantly more intricate behind the scenes. Past conflicts, albeit temporarily put to rest, remained dormant. There was no shared vision between Gramm and Jones, even though they performed on the same platform. Their relationship had been severely damaged, and the years spent apart had not helped. Imagine a bridge, constructed in a rush across a violent river, robust enough to maintain its balance, yet perpetually precariously precarious. The rifts in their alliance, resulting from animosity and years of failed collaboration, were plain to see. Every song they recorded and every concert they planned brought out old grudges, no matter how hard they tried to put it all together. Disagreements arose continuously due to creative differences. Always the charismatic lead singer, Gramm advocated for a return to the band's original sound. Unfiltered, passionate, and propelled by his commanding voice. Jones, on the other hand, was always trying out different genres and production methods in an effort to improve the band's sound. So what happened? A collaboration that resembled more of a struggle than a partnership. Every choice was a negotiating chip, and each recording session was an endurance test. Listeners could only hear the music. They were never privy to the behind-the-scenes struggles that occurred during sessions, the heated arguments that broke out, or the residual animosity that persisted. They released an album and continued to create music together despite their underlying animosity. However, the harmony was only surface level. Offstage, it was a whole other ballgame, even though they were unified to the public. Imagine a show where the chemistry between the performers is genuine, but the eerie quiet behind the scenes betrays otherwise. Gramm and Jones may have been in the limelight together, but their relationship was suffering from years of unspoken animosity. The unavoidable had taken place by 2003. The gap between them had become insurmountable. The continual bickering and Graham's growing sense of being ignored led him to make the tough decision to depart from Foreigner once more. There would be no turning back now. An era came to a close with the final split. It was a bittersweet goodbye for Gramm, as he finally let go of the tensions that had been plaguing him and a major chapter in his life was closing. It was an opportunity for Jones to face his demons. He brought in a new lineup and kept Foreigner moving forward under his leadership, but Graham's absence was obvious. When they broke up, it was more than simply the end of their working relationship. A complex relationship based on both genius and resentment came to a close. Gramm and Jones's years-long battle over competing values and unresolved hurts culminated in what fans may have perceived as a simple separation. They had begun as allies, evolved into enemies, and now parted ways as strangers, burdened by their common past. Gramm sought a more sedate existence, removing himself from the spotlight so he could contemplate the tumultuous path he had traveled. His years of intense performance with Forerunner had taken a toll, but he still occasionally played solo. The music was no longer the sole focus. After years of fighting on multiple fronts, personal and professional, it was all about finally settling down. Jones had to rethink the group's mission when he took the helm of Foreigner without Gramm. He persisted, intent on continuing the legacy, but the Foreigner that audiences saw no longer matched his performance. This was a band that had made it through the storm, but the wounds from that ordeal were obvious. There was no victorious return during the 1992 reunion. A protracted conflict came to a short ceasefire. It fulfilled the desires of the audience by reuniting Gramm and Jones. However, for the two men involved, it was only a temporary effort to make up for what had been lost. Those brief moments when they attempted to mend their relationship only to learn that some wounds are permanent. Lou Gramm's complicated legacy is brought to light by Mick Jones's remark today. Being a frontman wasn't all he was. The man's music was his life, and he sacrificed a lot for it. He has a contrasting life story. Happiness and sorrow. Working together and clashing. Feelings of love and treachery. There was a man fighting internal and external forces behind Graham's voice, which helped define an era. A battle for dominance and esteem lay at the heart of his artistic disagreements with Mick Jones. Even though they worked together to create some of rock's biggest hits, the wounds they inflicted will never completely heal. The real price of success is something that fans will have to think about as they process Jones's remarks. There is a personal narrative of hardship for every legendary band, and for every legendary singer. There is an individual battling struggles that the world will never completely comprehend. Lou Gramm's life is about more than music. It's about overcoming adversity, grieving a loss, and finding one's place in a world that expects so much from its citizens but provides so little.